it is our job to edit, to condense and reduce and determine what it is about a story that someone wants to know, needs to know, to try to convey, a hierarchy of things that are really important to things that are maybe a little less important but just interesting. The infinite space on the website is good and bad. It's good to have as much space as we want to publish as many things as we want so that things don't get left out. But the finite space of the newspaper also forces you to edit.
In the newsroom, editors are people who sort of take content that has been created and then edit it. But in the graphics department, the graphics editors actually create a lot of the content also. They do the reporting, they do the distilling of the information. We could also be called graphics reporters or graphics journalists, but editing is like one part of our job.
Our relationship with pure word editors, obviously it varies from editor to editor, but there are plenty of word editors in our newsroom who have really terrific ideas about what might make a good graphic, and actually we owe these editors a lot because we can't pay attention to everything, and they often point out opportunities for us that turn out to be really exceptional graphics, and we probably would never have done them if it weren't for word editors saying, hey, this reporter is starting to work on this, but there's clearly this visual angle, maybe you guys should get plugged in.
Within the newsroom, there is a competition for space. Of course, if we do a very large graphic, that means the story cannot be as large. And so one of the things that we've had to become good at in the graphics department is to defend the value of the space that we need for a graphic in terms of news value. This is going to explain this aspect of the story, which the reporter is not going to be able to explain very clearly, or it's going to take him a lot of words to do it. And so, we really need the space, for the graphic to do X. You really can't make a great graphic unless you have great material. And so we've always found it better for us to go out ourselves to gather the material that we need, because we know we know visually what kind of details we need to collect. In 2003, they sent me to Iraq. When you're out in the field, you can't really carry a computer with you everywhere and do your work on the computer. So I carry a sketchbook with me. You don't want to bring a lot of equipment for you because people are kind of nervous if you look like you have a lot of technology. You just have yourself in your sketchbook, and I would just paste things out. I could walk around the site and I would write down how many steps it took me to get from one side of the room to the other side of the room.
We want to publish immediately when there's news. And we've structured ourselves so that we can do that. So on a breaking news day, you'll have some initial reporting, kind of thin reporting. That information will feed a locator map that goes up on the site. And you keep reporting, you get a little more information. Maybe then you can do some kind of an annotated photograph of the scene or something that is a more elaborate visualization than just a locator map. You publish that on the website. You keep reporting, you try to build out whatever that visualization was, you push that out. Usually what happens is then you try to get to a point where you have a graphic that's up on the site that can hold up for a long period of time, that doesn't feel dated after an hour or 2 hours, and so then that is a placeholder. That gives you a little bit of a cushion to move forward.
The pieces that I really feel most proud of, I think, are often the breaking news pieces. It's so satisfying because people in those times really need help to understand what happened. And I think one really good example of this is the work that we did after 9/11. The month after 9/11, everybody, people work 7 days a week, 14, 15, 16-hour days, minimum, because you knew that everything that you did was so critical to our readership and the public to understand what happened and what was next. At the Times, we generally err on the side of clarity versus aesthetic. The simplicity that we try to achieve is an aesthetic in itself. So maybe that's what we end up with. But because we're generally working on fast deadlines and we don't have a lot of time to do something over and over again, that we will generally do the simplest and clearest route.
Sometimes good graphics come from an individual graphics editor quickly plugging into just surface level details of a story and having some idea for a novel way to like respond to that. Then we sort of determine whether or not the information is there to support that kind of visualization. It's the same thing with a reporter writing, right? There are times when reporters think about a story just based on a little bit of information and come up with a great way to write it. And then sometimes it doesn't bear out, like further reporting doesn't allow them to write the story that way. Sometimes it does, and when it does, then this sort of inspired idea takes shape as a real thing, and that happens with graphics too.
One thing that people often ask us is do you have a style book? Is there a visual style book that the New York Times has? And we don't, and we made some attempts to try to create one in the past, but it's difficult because a lot of the sort of principles that we sort of follow they're fluid and they depend on the situation and they depend on the material that you have, and we don't really try to set boundaries like rules for ourselves. Something can be explained in text and it becomes text, and when something is not, then it becomes a visual. I don't see that as text is first. I see that as just the natural differentiation between the storytelling that we do and that the reporters do. I feel that what we should try to do is find the story that is uniquely visual, that will give our readers a better understanding of what happened based on our visual storytelling.
There's a visual language at the Times, but there's no law that governs what that visual language is. There's just sort of an agreement, I think, among the designers here about what works well and is clear.